So we weren't talking about the Gamergate before.
No, we're not going to talk about it.
Obviously, so the personal political kind of issue has kind of come in here, and ideas of feminism. Now, you actually produce a zine, Filmme Fatales, which is an offline zine that looks at the intersection between film and women and feminism. Yeah. So maybe could you talk about that zine and why you've chosen to do something offline, and how that relates to the online, because you do a lot of blogging and stuff online, and in terms of intimate public.
Sure. I mean, on a very base level, when I started Filmme Fatales, it was mostly to do with the fact that I'd worked in online publishing and writing for a few years up until that point, and I wanted to do something a bit different and take a less time-specific approach to what I was writing, because, as you know, like blogging and online writing often is really tied to what's happening now, and if you're on a story a little bit late or you don't see a film like the second it comes out, the story's over and it's done.
It's like 5 minutes ago.
Exactly. Like, you know, there's a really beautiful film magazine from the UK called Little White Lies, which is like beautifully designed, and it's really specific to certain they have, like, you know, the Drive issue or they're based around new films that are out. And when you are getting a magazine from the UK, by the time you get it, you're just kind of like, oh, all right, well, this is not a new thing anymore. So yeah, it was partly a time thing, because it was kind of like a hobby and just a side project. But I guess the idea came from the fact that I didn't see anything that was doing that already. You know, there are websites and magazines about film, ones that are about feminism, and they occasionally cross over, but there was nothing that I could kind of go to and know, like, this was perspectives that I agreed with, or like writers that I wanted to hear from. And so I kind of tried to create something that I had been trying to, or something that I would want to buy and read and keep, and that kind of thing. And the blogging side of it is kind of supplementary. It's about, because it is print and you have to buy it, which is, you know, people don't like buying things because you have the internet and everything's free. But the blog side of things, I guess, is just, it's kind of like a precursor to what is in the magazine. It's the vibe of the kind of films that we talk about, because of my age and the age of my contributors and artists and that kind of thing. There's a big focus on films of the 90s and the early 2000s as well. So it's kind of, I hope that people kind of seeing what we're putting online, I say we, but it's me.
The multiple publics.
The things that I am putting on the blog will kind of, like, if there's something that they connect to, that will make them want to purchase and become a part of that community. And it has, like, the community side of it has been a nice little surprise as it's gone on, because it's only 2 years since I launched the first issue, and I've done 5 now, and along the way it's been a really beautiful kind of like organic community that's built up around it, both within myself and the contributors within each other. I'll assign a certain artist a job to illustrate a piece by one writer, and then I'll see that they're, you know, friends on Facebook, and they're emailing each other, and they're like taking pictures of their, you know, sharing that physical work online, which is really nice, and readers do the same thing. So I mean, one of the things about starting up an offline zine, what it kind of highlights is that far from the online, you know, diminishing the importance of paper and the offline, it actually reinforces it, doesn't it? And it kind of almost fetishizes it, like you've got a kind of like the love of paper and the love of touching something. I think that kind of like niche independent publishing thing is just getting even larger. Like it's getting more, and I was thinking of what you were saying, Jane, about like in Melbourne, if you build it, they'll come. And I feel like the amount of kind of small publishing and like niche products that are coming out now, there's even more than there have ever been before. And like at the Good Copy, we have a newsagent where we sell books and magazines and like small run print items. And I think the fact that online is so ubiquitous, and we know it's there, and we know that we can go there and read whatever we want or whatever we don't want even, that it just makes print a little more special, and that timelessness and plays a part in that, I think.
Brodie, you have skills as a writer and also as a blogger, but what do you think about, like, my 13-year-old daughter's friends all decide they're vloggers, and it's the most excruciating thing I've ever seen in my life, seeing these pretentious girls saying, "Oh my God, hi, welcome to my vlog," and honestly, does that just not kill you when you know that? I mean, that's the future. They're all doing it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I've dipped my toe into watching vlogs on YouTube and like the beauty kind of side of things. Yes. I don't get it either. Yeah. But like I understand though why maybe like your daughter and her friends are really interested in it though, because I find the audience is really like young teenage girls. And I think there's something to be said for like these kind of cool like mid-20s girls who have like beautiful makeup, really cute boyfriends, lots of Twitter followers, and they're speaking directly to that much younger audience and saying like, this is how to be cute and funny and cool, and like you can do it. All we need is a computer and and
a lot of money.
They're not dreadful messages, I must say. They're not dark messages, but it's more the notion that anybody can get on and do it and think that they're
but also
genius.
That everyone has something to say. Yeah.
Well, everyone does have something to say, so that's not a bad thing as well.
I'm just thinking about, like, you mentioned the good copy, and they actually do the social media for this MPavilion.
Yeah,
so,
and a few other places around town.
Yeah, so maybe could you elaborate on what they've been doing in terms of thinking about this actual site and then thinking about using the social media and how the social media, how those have kind of entangled or overlaid? And
yeah, I mean, well, something like MPavilion, we also work on rooftop cinema, for example, which is similar. It's primarily a real world experience. It's something that people go to, they spend time there, they experience it, and then where we kind of look after communicating messages that will make more people go there, and also seeing what people have been saying when they've been there. So it's this, we're kind of like in this in-between phase of like, we don't run the show, and we don't claim to, but we're invested in making sure that it's a success, because our messages kind of like help to bring people here in real time. But there's
definitely just kind of riffing off what Jane was talking about in terms of the kind of literacies, the media literacies, and then being kind of attached to kind of generational ideas, like when the police first started using social media and crisising, they used to like use block letters, and it's like, no, you don't shout on Twitter. That's not, it's conversational media.
And that makes it sound like an emergency.
Exactly. What, floods? So, I mean, maybe do you want to talk a bit about that kind of literacy, being of the generation where you would be seen as the digital native, but also complicating that not everybody is, a young person who has a great understanding of social media, and so some of that kind of ambiguity around media literacy as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know exactly how to answer that.
Just a badge statement will be okay. No pressure.
I mean, I guess one of the things that we always try to do as part, it's kind of like a building block of what we do at The Good Copy, is trying to communicate in a way that strips all of the fuss and the complications out of words and communication, because oftentimes when you're talking about things like film, like I find it sometimes when I'm getting pitches for Filmme Fatales, like film and art and critical writing can often be very complicated and very kind of exclusive, and it creates a barrier between the person who's writing it and the people who could potentially get something from it, and it makes it feel as though you need to already be clued in the know, and you need to know exactly what's going on before you can read something. Whereas I think it's really important to use platforms. You don't send the same message on Facebook as you do on Twitter, as you do on Instagram. You approach each of these platforms separately, and you know what their strengths are, you know how people use them and how people engage with them, and you play to those strengths, and you also understand that you have separate audiences on each of those spaces. So I guess that kind of you learn through trial and error as well, after you try to get people to sign up for an event using Instagram, and then you have to be like, oh wait, you can't actually link anywhere from Instagram. We need to play to the strengths of a platform like Twitter or Facebook, and then Facebook's not time specific, and so you need to, especially when you're running events and that kind of thing, you need to adjust for the fact that that these platforms they behave differently, and people who use them behave really differently.
Yeah.
Does that
And
kind of answer your question?
Yeah, totally. And so they're creating different intimate publics in that sense.
Yeah.
So the other, one of your many, many jobs that you do is also with the Independent Photography Festival.
Yeah.
And I mean, what's happened with photography over the last decade has been quite phenomenal in terms of Nokia has claimed that they have put the camera in more hands of more in the world than the whole of photographic history, which is a big claim to make.
Yeah. Also Nokia, not Apple.
No, not
Okay,
Nokia.
cool.
Well, you've got to think non-first world countries.
Sure, okay.
Anyway.
Gotcha.
But, I mean, one of the obvious things is like camera phone practices and you know, like things like Instagram, which has been called the nostalgia for the present, because, you know, like you're using all these kind of filters and stuff, which I trained as a photographer, and I actually ended up, my whole 4 degrees can be done in one filter. So am I angry? No. Has my labour been exploited? No. But how is that sharing and also the intimacy of, like, you know, if you're taking a picture from your camera, I mean, what, like your mobile phone, how that creates a different relationship between the subject and the sharing processes. How have you found that impacting the festival?
Well, I mean, the Independent Photography Festival has a focus. It's not explicit and it's not exclusively, but it has kind of like a preference for film, which is kind of interesting. And places around Melbourne, like Hillvale, which is a small photo lab, are really kind of championing that and making film processing really accessible and affordable. And IPF definitely has like a kind of preference to that kind of thing. But we had an interesting example this year where the judge's choice film photo that won, like it's a submissions based photo prize where people can submit up to 2 prints, and then it's kind of a judge's choice of who wins a major prize. And the guy that won this year had this really interesting photo that we all kind of looked at, and it was this girl on roller skates at a costume party. And when you looked really closely, you realised she had 4 legs coming out of her skirt instead of 2. But it took a minute to kind of like realise what was going on. Yeah. And we were all kind of like, how did this happen? This photo is incredible. And then we realised it had been Photoshopped, like, which outside of IPF, you would just assume it had been Photoshopped. But because of that focus on film, you kind of, you take it at face value and you assume what you're looking at is reality.
Right.
And so that kind of brought up some interesting conversations about what the festival was about and whether it should be exclusively film. But then we were kind of just like, well, Photoshop is the way that people deal with photography now, in a similar way that, you know, you could take a photo on your iPhone and print it out and submit it and it would just be as valid. But that instantaneous element to a camera phone and Instagram and that kind of thing is, I think, the appeal of it, and the way that we, you know, even just down to the way that we like use hashtags to become a part of a specific conversation when there's like, you know, bazillions of photos in there, and how to kind of like narrow those streams down of what we want to focus on.
And yet we'll be a generation left with no photos, because who gets them printed out?
The zine does.
There you go. That's great.
So buy the zine.
we might wrap up the and have another baton passing now, but thank you very much, girls, and thank you, Larissa. We thank Larissa and Brodie.